Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I saw The Parenting, and now I want to tell you about it. The Parenting is a dark comedy about a couple renting a mansion for a weekend getaway to impress their parents, and discovering that the house they rented is possessed by a demon. Kent Sublett wrote the screenplay and Craig Johnson directed the film, which stars Nick Dodani, Brandon Flynn, Brian Cox, Edie Falco, Lisa Kudrow, and Dean Norris. It's an ensemble film revolving around these two families coming together for a haunting weekend. For positives, The Parenting story has lots of humor, a little bit of horror, and a few decent character arcs. The cast does a good job with the material they're given, creating a few heartwarming moments and lots of laughs. The visual journey and soundtrack are fairly standard in what they present, but they're solidly executed. Okay, starting with the story. It's a 3-act film that follows a linear and somewhat cliché pathway. It starts with a flashback to the 80s to set up the horror background of the house, and then spends the rest of the first act introducing us to Rohan and Josh, and their parents. There's a little bit of horror and a lot of awkward comedy. In part 2, there's a possession that turns the stakes up. The demon starts attacking people and kills a few animals. The family starts fighting and divisions form, which leads into the third act. In part 3, the family comes together to fight back. They throw in some critical backstory to explain who the demon is and where he came from, and then they clean up all the story arcs. The ending ends up being a slightly confusing mess that leans heavily into the comedy aspects but doesn't quite make sense. The story is full of humor with just enough horror elements to keep things exciting. Cast-wise, there's 6 comedic roles, a few victims, and the lead couple. The 6 comedic roles are the parents, the friend, and the house's caretaker. They're all stereotypical comedy characters who are meant to keep things light. The actors do a good job with the material they're given, but most of what they get is silly lines, stupid moments, and basic reactions. Each of them gets to do a little bit of emotional work as well, and they do a solid job. For standout performances, there's really only 2 candidates: Nick Dodani as Rohan and Brandon Flynn as Joshua. As the main couple, they're the only characters who are given any real nuance. They get to be serious, they get to engage in romance, and both of them are hilarious in their own little ways. Nick Dodani as Rohan is a more responsible man trying to make a good impression. Brandon Flynn is his handsome, fun boyfriend who's a bit more laid back in life. Together they make for an opposites attract type couple and work together to solve their wacky problem. They have solid chemistry together and both of them are quite funny. Visually, the film is basic. It takes place in a mansion and doesn't do much with the space beyond basic horror tropes. Think scary noises and doors that magically don't open until the last second. There's a few horror moments when someone gets injured or an animal gets killed, but for the most part, the film leans heavily into the comedy side of things. There are also 2 puking scenes that are quite disgusting. Sound-wise, the film uses complex scored instrumentals that follow the scenery precisely. They flow with the emotions of the story and try to amplify them in any given moment. The tracks are more classical sounding in nature and bring a sense of drama to the film that wouldn't be present otherwise. On the negative side of things, those tracks are quite forgettable and generic. They don't make much of an impact and aren't always noticeable. They often blend into the background completely. Visually, the film doesn't take any chances and doesn't have anything special going on. It's just people running around a house at night with a few visual gags thrown in, and the occasional scary moment. The lack of horror elements completely kills any tension coming from that side of the story. It would have been nice to see some actual kills. When it comes to the story, it just doesn't make sense. The demon is constantly allowing his victims to escape when he shouldn't, and he doesn't seem to do all that much despite having a bunch of powers. The ending is also kind of a joke. It's funny how things go, but it doesn't make any sense and wasn't set up properly. Personally, I enjoyed the comedy elements of the film and the heartwarming moments, but found the horror parts completely useless and boring. I laughed a lot at Parker Posey and her nonsense villain routine, and the possessed dog scene. Dean Norris is an absolute gem, and I hope he gets more comedic roles in the future. All that said, I'd give this film a 6 out of 10. Remember, these are just my thoughts on the film. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Bye-bye.